agriculture to what we consider the conventional or industrial agriculture. And this is really dependent upon a lot of chemical inputs. It's really mechanized, and above and beyond, it's really extractive and focuses primarily on monoculture, so growing one or two crops year after year on really large expanses. And this really flies in the face of the many thousands of years of traditional and indigenous agriculture, which is far more regenerative in that it is focusing primarily on things like diversity, not just producing one cash crop, for example, but producing a multitude of crops in production that not only build up soil fertility, but also enhance, produce biodiversity, and that feed not only local communities, farming families, but also the world at large. And so really what we've seen over the last couple of years is an emergence of this term regenerative agriculture, in large part because we see the need to really see the intersection between agriculture as both a net source of greenhouse gas emissions, but also as a potential pathway to in fact reduce or in fact sequester carbon out of the atmosphere and turn back climate change. And some of the challenges we're seeing more broadly really coming into focus in the last maybe 10 to 20 years is that really farming communities and agricultural communities are really on the front lines of climate change. And so we're seeing increasingly really strong impacts on sort of like the climate spectrum as it relates to farming. So whether that's increased droughts or temperature fluctuations, or the increase in different types of pests and disease, a lot of which have to do with our growing global climate. And then we layer this on top of some of the bigger challenges that small farmers face across the world that are much more kind of structural in nature. And we're talking about corporate consolidation throughout the supply chain, the lack of availability of seeds, for example, or even the ability to market their harvests fairly. And so really our focus, or the way that we really define regenerative agriculture, is that it addresses climate change by focusing on soil fertility, but it also begins to bring in some of these other elements that are really critical for the long-term survivability and the climate resilience of farming communities. And those are like things like fair trade, fair prices, for example, and really the diversification of production to ensure that farming communities are much more resilient and stable. Next slide. And so really, what Grow Ahead has decided to focus on in consultation with farming communities all over the world is really this concept of agroforestry. And agroforestry is actually a very, very old concept. It was actually developed in part, through indigenous technology and work over the last couple thousand years. I would say primarily in Latin America and Polynesia, but we've seen examples of agroforestry really throughout the world, both in northern and southern climates. And really the idea is to basically build and optimize a farming system that reflects a natural environment, so like a natural forest. And so when we look at a natural forest that hasn't been really degraded by human interaction, what we're seeing there is really a focus on biodiversity, one that actually is in a way kind of a closed system that sort of manages its fertility, and above and beyond is much more resilient to climate shocks. And so what we've done in partnering with small scale farmers is look to support those efforts that really focus on building agroforestry systems. And what's great about these systems is that it really incorporates perennial species or trees into types of agriculture that can really be beneficial both for farmers and their local farm economy, but also for the environment as well. So anytime you were to go into a forest, you wouldn't see one species for miles and miles. You'd see a diversity of species really occupying different ecological niches. And by supporting agroforestry programs that really look to incorporate sort of what we call multi-strata or multi-level of crop production, we're able to actually really enhance the agrobiodiversity in the landscape and ensure that farming communities are much more stable. In many cases, this includes everything from growing shade trees to cover crops, incorporating livestock and animals where it's appropriate, and ensuring that farmers both have food to be able to put on their table, but also be able to sell for cash crops as well. And so we've seen this really typically in some of the more kind of common cases in agroforestry systems that include coffee and cocoa, which are really focused primarily on being shade crops. And so anytime you put a crop like coffee or cocoa out into the sun, it really stresses the crop out, basically loses production over the long haul, and really puts the farmers in a bad position in terms of their own overall sustainability. So we really see this perennial approach, this agroforestry approach, in collaboration with small farmers as really the key to building resiliency through rural communities all over the world. So here is an example of an early agroforestry system in partnership with a project in Samoa. And so what you see here is about 6 months into planting an agroforestry system that includes a variety of different crops. And so really the idea here is to build in species, for example, that provide biomass for the farm itself. So you in a way kind of grow your own fertility, but you also grow shade crops like cassava, which provides shade and protection for baby, cocoa seedlings, for example, in the early years to protect them, but also provides foodstuffs for the farmers themselves while they wait for the system to mature, after about 5 to 6 years. And you have things like cocoa and coconuts that actually can produce a cash crop. But if you notice here, there's a variety of species like taro, for example, and banana, papaya, and other fruit trees that will really round out the system in such a way that farmers will have enough for them to actually put food on their table, generate some income while the system begins to mature. And by and large, this is really a much more resilient system. And one of the things that we've seen over the course of the last maybe 10 to 20 years is that, of all the different technologies out there to actually reduce or mitigate greenhouse gases, but also sequester, carbon out of the atmosphere, agroforestry is right up there in the top 20 in terms of its ability to have these kind of multiple or co-benefits, which is sequester carbon, be much more climate resilient, but also provide employment and improve food security.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I feel like it's always so important to really get kind of the basis and understanding of these forms of agriculture that are not only improving the environment, but also really kind of focusing on the livelihoods of small scale farmers around the world. And that's really where Grow Ahead's sweet spot is, because, we're working at this interconnection of environmental work and social justice to really think about, striving for a more holistic vision of climate justice. And, since we do primarily work in supporting reforestation projects, we are in that kind of reforestation world. And with the growing popularity of planting trees and reforestation projects as this climate solution, we've seen a lot of these kind of either corporate-led, like monoculture mega projects. And so, we think of either an organization or a company kind of coming in and planting, hundreds of thousands, millions of trees on what they say is empty land, which that can be sometimes contentious about, who has the land rights, how they got that land, what was it used for previously. But also there's just can be kind of this lack of community integration. And so you get kind of a big splashy headline, but without that, follow through, we look back months, years later, we see that, maybe those trees didn't survive and grow into a strong forest system. Or maybe we see that, without focusing on that local knowledge, they were not planting trees that were suitable for that climate, or that were going to, and there can be negative things of really degrading the soil and things along that line. So when we work with cooperatives of small scale farmers, all the trees are being planted on individual family farms or kind of collective farms across the cooperatives. And so these farmers then become, like we say, stewards of these trees. They become part of their food forest system. They're integrated into, what they're growing to sell on a local or national or international scale, and they're integrated into the farms that their families are eating and sustaining themselves off of. So we see just so much more of a higher impact, because we're seeing like low death rates of the actual seedlings and saplings, but then also a greater impact in the community. So we're really trying to flip these kind of like traditional models that take development as like top down. And then now we're trying to think about really focusing on the expertise of local knowledge and local indigenous expertise. And so that's why all of our projects are completely planned, implemented, and maintained by local cooperatives and grassroots organizations. community-led projects are just so much better equipped to understand and address the local needs, and think about long-term success. So, we're always thinking about how do we approach something like reforestation, something like taking climate action, in a way that allows communities to have sovereignty over their food, over the resources that they need to spread knowledge and really focus on this climate resiliency element. So, and as we're kind of going along, if anyone has any questions and you want to throw them in the Q&A, we can address them and get to them at the end. I should have said that one at the beginning, but we'll keep on going. So, what we're really here to talk about is, thinking about, for us folks in the herbal products industry, we see that what drives this industry in this world is really quality, safety, health, and increasingly so sustainability. And our customers and consumers that we're working with are they're concerned. They want to be following, supporting, and engaging brands and organizations that are really thinking about their environmental and social footprint. But one thing I really want to focus on is actually this third one here. And that says that 76% of conscious consumers will research whether a brand's social and environmental stand is authentic. And so I think that this is where we're always really focusing on, is because, more and more people don't want to see the bare minimum. They don't want to see just kind of greenwashing. They want to be engage with brands that are transparent and taking like real action in a way that is thoughtful, authentic, and really intersectional. So kind of getting into a little bit more of how we create partnerships with the folks that we work with. So we have awesome business partners in industries a little bit all over the place, and so we've had different ways to engage depending on kind of what works best with their model, what is most engaging to their customers. So, first of all, we have kind of the tree planting per unit, and so we have worked with a lot of kind of like folks in the coffee industry that do fun things like for every bag of coffee you plant a tree. We work with a brand called Peisel surfboards, and so for every surfboard you buy, you plant a tree. We think of that typical 1-for-1 in tree planting because it makes sense, it's tangible, it's really great and super engaging. And so then we've also recently been really focusing on this eco shipping or e-commerce checkout. Especially in the middle of a pandemic when so many of shopping habits are being really changed. We're seeing this huge focus on e-commerce and taking our shopping online. And so this is an option to really offer customers the option to add $1 to their order to either plant a tree or take responsibility for the carbon footprint of having their package shipped to their doorstep. And so we have a app on Shopify, but we've also worked with folks in different with different e-commerce platforms to basically put a little checkbox at checkout that has the option to just add $1. And I think that that's also a really great way to bring things full circle, because you can have that option that says, hey, add $1 to join us in sustainability initiatives. And then you can have a click like a read more, like we're already doing X, Y, and Z, and we want you to join us to really amplify that impact. This is where we're planting trees. These are the cooperatives we work with, and I think it can be a really great way to not just work on things internally, but really kind of empower your customers to join you in that work. And so we have worked with folks in the sustainable fashion world. We work with some folks called Tribe Alive and some other folks that are in kind of like an ethical subscription. And so we've worked with people in a little bit of different worlds, because I think this connection of environmental and social impact really rings true across so many different industries. So another one of our projects is the Community and Carbon Initiative. So this is actually a program that really came out of some conversations with folks that were discussing that, being carbon neutral or taking responsibility for their carbon footprint is something that's really important for both their kind of internally for their company, but then also to their customers. But that the options out there in the kind of carbon accounting world weren't as enticing for them, or didn't have that kind of like impact storytelling element, and it didn't feel as kind of like grounded in something super tangible and realistic. So we have been working with folks to calculate their carbon footprint, and then partnering them up with the grassroots-led reforestation projects. We can find the sequestration rates of these multi-strata agroforestry projects, and then really just kind of connect folks and link it together, so that they're able to take responsibility for that carbon footprint, but in a way that's really kind of focusing on supporting community livelihoods, as well as carbon capture and kind of like the science technical side of it. So the fourth one we got here is direct corporate contributions. So, we have worked with folks, since our inception. We work with we've worked with Gaia Herbs and Dr. Bronner's and Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's and so many other folks, really on kind of a direct corporate contribution. And so this is a way that's maybe not focusing on cause marketing. Maybe that's not the angle, but really thinking about, okay, you're looking to support these type of regenerative projects that are supporting farming communities and really thinking about the environmental and social benefit. And so we set folks up to contribute to a specific campaign, and then we can always help with kind of the impact storytelling with that as well. And then the last one over here on the end, which I don't know if you can see, my face might be over it, is our employee activation campaigns. And so these are actually super fun because we're seeing more and more that it's really important for employees to feel like they're a part of a business or an organization that is aligned with their values. And so we work with folks. One of my favorite campaigns we did was with a company called Thrive Market, and they had a super fun like employee appreciation week, and we had like a little separate reforestation campaign for them, and folks were planting trees in the name of their coworkers, and we have these little e-cards, and they were sending each other notes like, thank you so much for being on my team. And it was really wholesome. I got all of the e-cards sent my way too, so I got to read through them. And then Thrive Market also matched all the contributions and donations that were made by their customers. And so, the biggest thing that for us is that we're always wanting to work with companies that are really aligned with the missions that we care about, which is this kind of environmental and social impact. And so we always have this kind of like fun way of working with folks to kind of see which of these makes the most sense. Maybe it's a combination, maybe it's a different type of project that really helps folks to connect and tell that story. So this is just a little bit of a few of the folks that we've worked with in the past. And yes, impact storytelling. So the one of, I think, the coolest parts of how Grow Ahead works specifically is that we do all of our projects on a project by project and a campaign by campaign basis. And so what this means is that when we partner up with folks, we kind of send over the portfolio of projects that we have right now, and you'll know exactly which cooperative you're working with, how many trees are being planted, in what areas, like what are the species, like we have all of that information to tell. And so part of it is like this really, I think, clear connection for folks to understand, like, okay, we're not just like planting trees in the abyss, but like having this really direct connection to that campaign and to that project. But it also has it's a great avenue to tell that story of impact, but also to use that as an educational tool. So when we work with folks, we're thinking about a couple of different levels, working on some of the nitty gritty stuff. If you're thinking about your carbon footprint, we'll help you do some of the breakdown of carbon footprints of environmental impact. We think of the educational side of it, which is that, we can utilize this partnership to really launch conversations about climate action, about regenerative agriculture, about kind of climate change and commitments to disrupting this business as usual. Because we work directly with cooperatives, we have interviews and photos from those cooperative partners. In the past, we've done really cool kind of like webinars and Q&As with farmers that are working on the ground. So you're able to like really see like who exactly these projects are impacting, like what they're doing, you know, why they have chosen these specific trees to plant, and kind of and what the impact of that is. And then, like we said, kind of transparency and specificity. So, you know, providing the information on where the trees are planted and who's planting them. And for our projects in general, you know, we're really thinking about and wanting to focus on not just the environmental impact, but so much more. And so that's why in each of our projects, you know, the funding of the project is of course covering like the actual like seedlings and saplings that will be planted into the ground, but it's also going to be covering the infrastructure. So things like the either building of nurseries or improvement of nurseries, thinking about technical assistance to help, you know, run that project. You know, basic things like transportation of getting things from, you know, getting plants from the nurseries to the areas that are going to be reforested. And then there's always a community education aspect of it. And so this is where the projects can be fun and kind of different, because we are able to have this community education aspect be different for each project. So some folks really focus on, right now we're seeing especially within a pandemic, this really large focus on food security and food sovereignty, because communities are realizing that it's imperative for them to grow their own like healthy and fresh foods for their families and communities. You know, that focus might be on income diversification. It might be something along the lines of kind of integrating agroforestry systems with beekeeping, or with, you know, producing organic fruits and vegetables to bring to an organic market. We have done an awesome amount of kind of like women-led projects. So they're projects that are completely run by either the kind of like women's association or women's group within that cooperative. And so it's thinking about income diversification and new kind of opportunities for women in the cooperative. So I have a little bit of a example of one of our projects that we have going on right now. So this is our reforestation and beekeeping in Guatemala. So we're working with a cooperative, Ixil in Guatemala. And so it's about 200 indigenous coffee farmers. And so this cooperative is doing some really awesome work, because we're thinking about agroforestry and reforestation as a part of a long-term food security and food sovereignty plan. So, you know, like so many other farmers, they really suffer from seasonal hunger. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, they established a beekeeping program. And so they're producing organic honey that they sell at local markets. And they're also doing kind of like value added projects like making jams and other things with that honey. And so they're thinking about kind of diversifying income and generating more income for the families, promoting environmental resiliency. We know, you know, we talk about it all the time, how important pollinators are for biodiversity, for that can help with their agroforestry systems that are growing so many different crops, and include coffee that they're selling at, on an international market. They're planting, you know, fruit trees that they are using with the jams and the honey to sell at local markets, and as well as eating with their families. And so it's really thinking about kind of all of these intersections of food security, of you know, income generation, of biodiversity and environmental resiliency, of beekeeping, and really kind of community livelihoods as a whole. So I think that it's really fun to see how these projects allow for so much storytelling, because there's so many ways we can talk about it. You know, I think that a lot of people are really understand like reforestation is good and positive, like trees are good, but like we're always trying to kind of push that further and say, okay, so, you know, the tree is just one part. Let's talk about you know, in general, the agriculture and how it contributes to climate change, but also can be used as a tool to take climate action and remedy those and mitigate those effects of climate change. Let's talk about communities, and how there are communities on the ground that are really driving these climate solutions and are really, you know, protecting the biodiversity of the whole planet, and how we can kind of come together to make high impact projects and really partner for change in those communities. Awesome. So yeah, it's a little bit of my spiel, kind of talking about the work that we do, and especially how we partner with folks to really think of, like we said, high impact, community centric, and really responsible reforestation. Like we say all the time, it's not just what you do, it's how you do it, and we're really wanting to kind of empower that change that is grounded in communities on the ground, in small scale farmers, in the work that they're already doing. And we're not reinventing things that aren't already happening, but really connecting folks to that awesome work, so that we can come together to make amazing and holistic change. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to throw something in before, and I'll kind of go through some of the questions as well.
Oh, that was great, Julie. Yeah, I'm really eager to get into the conversation and the Q&A, so thank you.
Awesome. Okay, 1 second. I think I might have to pull up the Q&A on my phone because my computer, as I am screen sharing, it is not letting me do both. Let's see. Or Ryan, if you have them in front of you and you want to read out one of the questions, you can while I...
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first one here is from Anonymous Attendee, which is a great name. Thank you, Mr. or Ms. Attendee. So the first one is curious how the companies you are currently working with characterize their partnership with Grow Ahead or similar efforts, so it's reflected properly in their bottom line. Because we all know the bean counters have to justify their costs and programs. So Juliet, in your experience, what has been sort of the way that different companies have sort of characterized either publicly or internally their partnership with Grow Ahead?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, we are a 501c3 like nonprofit organization. So all contributions and donations to these projects do have their fun tax deductibility. And so that's kind of like one of the more logistic ways. What I think has been kind of, that question can be answered a little bit differently, dependent on how folks have partnered up with us. So we see ourselves kind of as either a core nonprofit partner to different organizations, or really like something that is using to push forward their sustainability initiatives. And so when we're doing work that's a little bit more in kind of like the community and carbon initiative, this is thinking in the world of like carbon offsets and an alternative to that. And so that may be something that, yes, like you're pulling out of the bottom line to contribute to those types of projects, but they are a really important and core value of the business and of the organization. And then when we have the type of things that are kind of in either an e-commerce add-on, then it's a great kind of like dual program. And so you're doing the kind of contributions internally that the organization or the business is doing, but then also thinking about empowering your customers and your consumers to join in on those efforts. And so you're thinking about kind of increasing impact in not only like dollars and cents kind of way, but also in really using that as an educational tool. So, a big part of kind of what I do is helping folks to do that, either impact storytelling or kind of like communication of our partnership. And so, from things like building out either a sustainability or partnership page on folks' websites, to doing kind of like some more of the cause marketing things with creating social media engagement. We've done like a lot of really fun kind of like Q&A style, like Instagram takeovers and Instagram stories and things along those lines that are like a little bit more engaging, and really thinking about how we're conveying to folks what the partnership means. And I think what's great about it is that for so long, I think that businesses and also organizations have seen kind of like environmental impact over here and social impact over here, and thinking about them as separate entities. And so by really like bringing them together, then we're able to make more effective change that really kind of closes that impact loop story. I don't know if Ryan, you want to add anything else in kind of talking about how we've partnered with folks and maybe what they've.
I think you did a great job of talking about kind of how we partner with folks here, in the U.S. and in North America. The one thing I think is important to sort of underscore is just sort of our relationship with producer organizations as well. So that partnership is also pretty key. You touched, Julia, on that, during the course of the presentation, and just wanted to sort of emphasize that, the reason Grow Ahead has strategically focused our work on agroforestry and partnering with producer organizations is in part because of our relationships with these networks and producer organizations, and also because we were going through a longish process of, sort of surveying and gathering information from different stakeholders as we look to really focus where funds, in terms of this type of work should be focused on. And really agroforestry was the one thing that really underscored some of their biggest concerns of producer organizations, both in terms of food security, economic diversification, but also climate change as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the next question here is from Desiree. Desiree asks, do you have a percentage or a dollar amount that goes towards the projects or plans versus Grow Ahead's administration or overhead? And then she also has a question about what the money that goes to how many different countries, or is there any work that's done in the US?
Yeah, so 2 questions there. The first one kind of talking about our split between programmatic and admin and overhead. So, we're very lucky to have really strong partners that have helped kind of fund the majority of our overhead, which means that we have about a little bit less than 7% of funds go to, our international bank transfers and, all those kind of like amazing overhead costs. And then the rest go directly to the farmer organizations on the ground. And so those are actually built into all of our campaigns and built into like our $1. So we have it as kind of an average of all of our projects across the board, $1 plants a tree. And so that covers, like I said earlier, the this kind of like smaller admin costs. It covers the infrastructure like nurseries and transportation and technical assistance. It covers, the actual plants that will be put into the ground. And then it covers that community education element. So, we are very lucky to have a low overhead, which allows us to really like increase impact way more, and really putting the majority of those funds directly into the projects on the ground. And so when we do because we work actually in kind of a crowdfunding way, in that way that, we bring together funds from businesses, organizations, as well as kind of like individual contributors and individual donations. So each of our projects will have, the funding goal, and that entire funding goal that is fundraised will go directly to the cooperatives. So there's not much of a kind of a breakout from that. I don't know if Ryan, you want to add anything onto our little breakdown?
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job there, Julia. One of the things that, when we look to support projects, sort of, I guess there's 2 things that we look at. One is, the ability of a partner to be able to actually implement the project. And so in general, if any of you have been involved in sort of like the international development world, or even here in the United States, oftentimes people will sometimes chase, where the development money is. And so even if they don't have an agroforestry program, they may try to launch one just to be able to capture some of these funds. And so our goal really is to work directly with those organizations that have an established track record of planting agroforestry systems and can actually accommodate and move these programs forward. So that way we're actually, sort of reducing as much of the overhead as possible to be able to implement these systems, but also bearing in mind that even partners have their overhead as well. And it's not just as simple as just going out and finding seeds and planting them in agroforestry systems. But, as Julia mentioned, there's a fair amount of training, oversight, and implementation that needs to happen as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's actually a really important element to bring up is that, because Grow Ahead itself is not on the ground, are directly working with cooperatives that are doing all of that that implementation and project management, we have to have really strong partners that have a a proven track record, that have connections with a larger network, whether that be kind of commercial partners or other foundation, nonprofit, or kind of national partners. My dog is now responding to your dog barking. So that kind of like foundation of trust that allows us to work how we do, is because we have really, really great partners, and that really strong history. I think there was a second part of the question. Can you just repeat that one, Ryan?
And so this one deals primarily with that whether or not we work with any projects within the U.S. or is most of their projects overseas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all of the reforestation projects we work with are international. Part of our Grow Ahead was founded partially on the mission to connect folks with small scale farmer organizations that don't have that kind of access normally to be connected with either businesses or organizations or individuals, in the United States, in Canada, and in Europe. And so as much as there is really great work going on in the United States, and we, also it's a huge need to be reforesting here as well, as we're seeing with so many fires, and thinking about kind of better, more sustainable agricultural systems. We do work exclusively internationally, since that is really the focus of our work.
All right, great. I think that is it for the Q&A, right, or the questions that have been put there. If anybody else has any additional follow-up questions or anything else they'd like to know or discuss, by all means, please go ahead. Oh, great. All right, back up. I'm with Yogi T, and we are currently building a Regen Ag pilot program. I would love to connect with someone from Grow Ahead offline to ask some more company-specific questions. We will get in touch with you, Becca. I think we have your information on the roster. So thank you so much for reaching out.
Yeah, we'll follow up with kind of everyone who's registered for the organization with a little bit more of the stuff we went over, but then also like ways to get in contact with us.
All right.
That sounds good.
That's it.
Yeah, well, if there's no other questions, then thanks y'all for spending part of your late morning or early afternoon with us. We're super excited to connect, and hopefully we'll get to talk a little further offline with many of you guys, because we're available to chat and talk further. This is something that we're always really, really excited about to think about, not just how we're partnering up, but really thinking about so many organizations right now and businesses are taking more of a look into their supply chains, into kind of thinking about regenerative or sustainable projects, and thinking about how they can really kind of push forward the commitment to both environmental and social impact. So thank you guys so much, and hopefully we'll all chat soon.
Thank you.